Hey y'all, Assalamu alaikum. I'm going to take a step back with these Ramadan posts because one of my commenters, subscribers rather, commented asking me to explain what Ramadan actually is. And I guess it's appropriate to talk about what Ramadan is supposed to be like before, doing a series of posts about how Ramadan during a lockdown is different. So basically, let's just go into the meaning of the word itself. Now, I just looked this up in a source called Lane's Lexicon. Lane was basically a British Egyptologist slash linguist slash Orientalist who compiled, and after his death, his nephew completed a very comprehensive dictionary of the Arabic language. So it's kind of like my go-to source. Lane's Lexicon, you can easily look it up. The root word of Ramadan, according to Lane, is Ramadan, which means to become intensely hot. As the name of a month, Ramadan, uh, actually predates Islam. So it's something very ancient. The names of the months in the Arabic calendar, which is now the Islamic calendar, but there are some differences. For one, it's not allowed to change the order of the months. That's something that happened not related to Ramadan, but the pre-Islamic Arabs maintained a custom going all the way back to the Prophet Ibrahim or Abraham of certain months being sacred in which there could be no fighting. Now, if some groups wanted to fight or did not want to fight, and the month that they were in didn't correspond to their wishes, they would sometimes say, okay, well, let's switch out this month wherein we can't fight for a month wherein we can, and next month will be that month wherein we can fight, wherein we cannot fight, so we can kind of, do what we want to do. So that's one of the main differences. Now, overall, the name Ramadan means the month Shahr Ramadan is the month of intense heat. So at a certain point, the months were connected to the seasons, which means that every Ramadan fell at the same time of the year, I'm assuming, like every July does or every January does. So that's why every Ramadan was intensely hot. Now, in the Islamic calendar, Ramadan is the ninth of the lunar months. Now, lunar months basically are not connected to seasons. The lunar calendar is strictly tied to the lunar cycle. So Ramadan, like every other month, begins when the new moon, which is basically a couple of nights of no moon, ends, and you can see the sickle of the new month. So one of the symbols of Ramadan, when you see a lot of decorations, is that kind of sickle moon, the very thin kind of C-shaped, portion of the moon. That's because that's how we know it's Ramadan. And obviously, if Muslims don't pay attention to the Islamic calendar the rest of the year, they will at that time. So basically, when a reliable person has said that they've seen it, then the month begins. So not every month is the same number of days every year because, the moon cycle is not exactly regular. And also, the lunar month is shorter than this kind of somewhat solar calendar that most of the world follows, like the 12 months of the year, because which means that like I think it's about 11 days shorter. So long story short, every year a given month becomes 11 days earlier in the year than it was last year. So Ramadan started a little bit later in April, basically last year than it did this year, and so on. And I can remember, as I've said in another post, just a few years ago, Ramadan was in the middle of summer. A few years before that, Ramadan was in the fall. And when I first became Muslim, corresponding to 2004, about like I think 16 years ago, Ramadan was actually early winter, right? So that's what Ramadan is from the month standpoint. Now, as far as the process, um, it's again, uh, well, okay, it's not tied to the moon after the month starts. Then we go back to following the solar cycle. The moment that the sun goes below the horizon, which means that you can't see it. If you're looking at the sea, it would look like the solar disk just kind of drops under it looks like a penny at the very end, and then you literally see the disk just sink into the water. At that exact moment, when you can't see the sun anymore, you break your fast, okay? And that's kind of like the beginning of the date, in the sense of the next day kind of starts, like the next calendar day, I guess, starts at that moment. So you would break your fast, and you can eat and drink, as well as other things. Like if you're married, then sexual relations with your spouse are allowed until the sun's light first becomes visible over the horizon. Not the sun itself, but just when its rays of light begin to slightly change the sky to brighten up. And that's dawn. Now, with light pollution, that's hard to observe. So it's basically calculated. Now, I live in a predominantly Muslim country. So we hear the calls to prayer corresponding with these moments, because that prayer when the sun goes down is called Maghrib all year, where Maghrib means, like kind of west, because the sun sets in the west. And the prayer where the sun starts to rise, or you can first see the light over the horizon, is the dawn prayer, Fajr prayer, because the night is being separated from the day, right? Now, once that moment happens, that Fajr moment, a person can no longer eat nor drink nor continue sexual relations. So what happens before that prayer is like a meal, and that meal is called suhoor. The meal that you eat to break the fast, breakfast, literally the breaking of the fast, is called iftar. And iftar kind of means breaking, right? Separating. So you see the sun go down, you break your fast, you can eat, you can drink, and be merry. Then the first rays of sun come, you hear the call to prayer again, if you are near a mosque, and then you cease from eating and drinking all day. Now here's something very interesting. The length of the day varies widely around the world. So if you're closer to the equator, I guess you have a shorter day than someone who's like in the Arctic, I guess, and it depends on the season. So Ramadan, let's say in Iceland in winter, would be a few hours. Ramadan in the UK in summer, or even let's say Iceland in summer, would be 20 plus hours, and technically the sun never goes all the way as many degrees as it needs to below the horizon for it to be considered nighttime as per the Islamic description. That's another story. Long story short, right now you could look at a chart. Different people around the world are fasting at different time, at different lengths of time. However, we're united in the ritual. It's pretty standard. No one changes the rules when you can eat, when you can drink, whether or not you can eat or drink. That's exactly the same no matter where you go. And I've traveled in Ramadan quite a lot, been to different countries in the middle of Ramadan, and it's the same, right? exactly the same. Like there's no, oh, over here we do it different. You can drink, but only this, or something like that. There's exactly the same. Um, and then during the night, there is a special prayer called Taraweeh, which is basically in the nights of Ramadan. If you attend Taraweeh at the same masjid for every night, you would hear the entire Quran. So a section of the Quran is recited every one of those nights, and you would hear it in its entirety. And that is a book this big. This is my very old Quran copy. This is a translation with a lot of commentary. So a normal size Quran, I'll just show you. This is the size of it with no translation at all. Just the pure Arabic, nothing else there. Bismillah. So you would hear the entire book. And if you understand it, which is hard even for native speakers of Arabic because it's kind of a modern dialect like Shakespearean English versus modern English, maybe even broader in difference. It's very moving, it is very moving to hear it. And it's even something that can move you if you're starting to understand, because you realize, like, I'm listening to the actual words of God. And this goes to the root of Ramadan. This is the month in which the first verses of the Quran were ever revealed. The background of that is a man named Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was living his life as a normal person, a noble person, the grandson of one of the noblest of all the Arabs in their history. But nonetheless, just kind of living a normal life, married. But he used to spend this particular month of Ramadan in meditation in a cave, which basically meant before he was a prophet, he would just go into a cave and sit and kind of meditate. And in addition to having these different remembrances or praises of God that he would do, he would think about the problems of his age, because the Arabian Peninsula was kind of a lawless society. It was, the strong preying on the weak, tribal law. Blood feuds could go where someone drinking from a well that was supposedly belonging to another tribe could end up getting killed. And that feud, the retaliations, the mutual retaliations could go on for hundreds of years. People are killing each other over literally a drink from a well that happened 100 years ago or more than 100 years ago. The house in Mecca, the house called the Kaaba, was a house dedicated to Allah, but over time idolism had crept in, so that there were 360 idols around there. And people would make, sacrifices, and it's like, there's a statue that you made or someone made, and now you're putting food in front of it, and you can wait and see an animal come and take that food. And very strange customs like, walking around the Kaaba naked and things like this. People used to bury their daughters. A person who was away from his tribe had no protection, so that he could be ripped off, he could be attacked, enslaved, simply because his tribe was not around to protect him. So there was a very famous companion of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam after he became a prophet. And before that, he was an Arab boy who was kidnapped because of a tribal feud and enslaved and sold in Mecca. And this happened before the advent of Islam. And that's basically how things could be. So these issues, these wars, these injustices, this backwardness, this disunity that didn't allow people to elevate themselves and become a civilization, and this lack of a sound basis for living, the lack of a sound and just code, which again limited human potential and drove people down to their worst nature while blocking them from their higher nature, is something that deeply disturbed him. Now, one of these months, he would do this, like I said, once a year, like a yogi in a cave. I mean, what you think about when you think of the Himalayas, there's yogis in caves meditating, just to get away from everything, to at least, have some peace within yourself, and to maybe try to figure out what to do. In one of these months, an angel came down and said, Iqra, read. Now, like many people at that time, this man, Muhammad, who was later to become Rasulullah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the messenger of Allah, was illiterate. So he said, Ma ana biqari, I can't read. So what are you saying? And I don't even know what's going on. And this happened again, read. And he said that again, same thing again, I can't read. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord who created. And this was the first verse of the Quran. And that happened in the month of Ramadan. So that is kind of, I won't say that's why we fast in Ramadan, but it is connected to the Quran that we, just like this person who was soon to be a prophet, spend time meditating on God, on life, on reality, on our nature, and these are the things that basically the Quran addresses. How we should be living on a personal level, on a societal level, on a spiritual level. The nature of spirituality, the nature of God, the nature of reality, the nature of humanity, right? The nature of the multiverse and what is beyond the multiverse. Those are the things that we meditate on when we meditate, when we sit and think deeply, when we sit and talk deeply, when we go on YouTube, to explore things intellectually. Doesn't that kind of encompass what we are looking at when we go there, to learn something, to be engaged by something? So reflecting on the Quran and being reflective in general, abstaining, right, allows us to do that. Now, I'm not a scholar, so I can't say what the reasons for Ramadan are. I'm just going to basically read what Allah said to Rasulullah, his messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I'm just reading the translation written by Abdullah Yusuf Ali. And in the second chapter of the Quran, verse 183, it says, and I'm reading the translation, O you who believe, fasting is prescribed to you as it was prescribed to those before you, that you may learn self-restraint for a fixed number of days. But if any of you is ill or on a journey, the prescribed number should be made up from days later. For those who can do it with hardship, there's a ransom, meaning for those who can only fast with difficulty, you can pay a fee, the feeding of one that is poor. But he that will give more of his own free will is better for him, and it is better for you that you fast if you only knew. Ramadan is the month in which was sent down the Quran as a guide to humanity and clear signs for guidance and judgment. So every one of you who is present during that month should spend it in fasting. But if anyone is ill or on a journey, the prescribed period should be made up by days later. Allah intends every facility for you. He does not want to put you to difficulties. He wants you to complete the prescribed period and to glorify Him in that He has guided you. And perchance you shall be grateful. When my servants ask you concerning me, I am indeed close. I respond to the prayer of every supplicant when he calls on me. Let him also listen to my call and believe in me, that they may walk in the right way. Permitted to you on the night of the fasts is the approach to your wives. They are your garments and you are their garments. Allah knows what you used to do secretly amongst yourselves, but He turned to you and forgave you. So now associate them and seek what Allah has ordained for you, and eat and drink until the white thread of dawn appears to you distinct from its black thread. Then complete your fast till the night appears, but do not associate with your wives while you are in retreat in the mosques. Those are limits set by Allah. Approach not nigh thereto. Approach not nigh thereto. Don't come close to these limits. Thus does Allah make clear His signs to mankind, that they may learn self-restraint. Now the translation is not an agreed upon wording and meaning. Different words have different shades of meaning. But one point is, it says, do not associate with your wives while you are in retreat in the mosques. This tradition of withdrawing from society in order to reflect spiritually continued even with the revelation of the Quran and the beginning of prophecy and the establishment of Islam as a society, in that during Ramadan, it's an established practice it's optional, but it's an established practice to retreat to the mosques for part of the month and basically only stay there, just pray, and what else would you do? You're not even eating, you're not even drinking, so you're just going to read, you're going to meditate, praise, pray, worship, make supplications. And in those times, if you're in seclusion, if there's no need, then there's no reason why men and women would, wives and spouses would associate with each other, because the idea is to, do that. And if you think about it, it's not saying that there's anything wrong about wives or husbands. Rather, it's that typically the person, if you're married, the person, what you think about the most is your spouse. So for you to really want to break away, for your mind to be free for some time, right? A few nights out of the year, of course, you'd have to be away from your spouse, because your spouse and the issues that you go through with that person are, I would say, the majority of your thought space. What I'm going to do is just read these verses because I wanted to read them anyway in Arabic, and I'm somewhat proficient in the language, and you can just listen along. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون أياما معدودات فمن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر وعلى الذين تطيقونه فدية طعام مسكين وعلى الذين يطيقونه فدية طعام مسكين فمن تطوع خيرا فهو خير له وأن تصوموا خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان فمن شهد منكم الشهر فليصمه ومن كان مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر ولتكملوا العدة ولتكبروا الله على ما هداكم ولعلكم تشكرون وإذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب أجيب دعوة الداع إذا دعان فليستجيبوا لي وليؤمنوا بي لعلهم يرشدون أحل لكم ليلة الصيام الرفث إلى نسائكم هن لباس لكم وأنتم لباس لهم علم الله أنكم كنتم تختانون أنفسكم فتاب عليكم وعفى عنكم فالآن باشروهن وابتغوا ما كتب الله لكم وكلوا واشربوا حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود من الخيط الأسود من الفجر ثم أتموا الصيام إلى الليل ولا تباشروهن وأنتم عاكفون في المساجد تلك حدود الله فلا تقربوها كذلك يبين الله آياته للناس لعلهم يتقون. So that's Ramadan. It's last but not least, it's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. So it's one of the 5 things that basically makes you a Muslim. And actually, these pillars are usually listed by degree of difficulty in a way. So first of all is the saying, La ilaha illallah. There is no God but Allah. None should be worshipped but Allah. Muhammadur Rasulullah. And Muhammad is his messenger, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Then there is the prayer, the 5 daily prayers, the paying of zakat, which is basically a tax on wealth that you've had, wealth that you've accumulated, not just income. Then there's fasting for those who can, for those who are not traveling. And then there's the Hajj, which is the pilgrimage to Mecca in another one of the Islamic calendar months called Dhul Hijjah, the month of Hajj, basically. And what's interesting is that all of these things unite Muslims, but especially Ramadan, because we're all doing the exact same thing wherever we are in the world at the same time. We don't all pray at the exact same time because it's connected to the sun. Could be nighttime somewhere and daytime somewhere else. But everybody's fasting in Ramadan. You know what I mean? And you always invite people over to break your fast with you, or you get invited. You meet strangers, you go to the mosque, they provide food, and you congregate with people that you don't normally see. So it's a beautiful thing. I hope you know a little bit more about it. I definitely welcome you to join it. That's all for now. Assalamu alaikum. Peace. And have a blessed Ramadan. P.S. I was just about to post this, and I remember there was one little question that I wanted to address, which is, how do you know the Quran is true? You know, how do you know that an angel talked to someone? You know, angels are real, that sort of thing. How can you believe all of this? Why should anyone believe all of this? And I would say that the proof of the Quran is in the Quran, meaning the Quran is one of these miraculous proofs that you can observe. So, for example, you can't see whether or not Moses was empowered to split the Red Sea and cross it. You can't see whether or not Shiva was able to string a bow miraculously, etc. You know, we can't see or experience, Siddhartha, the Buddha's enlightenment. You know, we weren't there under that tree. But the Quran is something that you can search within for proofs. So it seems like the most mundane miracle, or even a non-miracle, because it is a book. But being that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasulullah, was the last messenger, meaning this is the final message, it has to be something where the proof of the message, in addition to the message itself, can be preserved and distributed and observed and critiqued until the end of time. That's why it's a book. And so other messages and their proofs have been lost or corrupted. I mean, no one's claiming that the books that exist today are direct translations of someone who wrote down the words of someone as they spoke. You don't have Aramaic source texts for the New Testament. You know, Aramaic being the language that Jesus spoke. There's no saying, hey, this is the Aramaic original and this is your translation into your language. And, the person who wrote down these words was a contemporary of Jesus, and he or she just wrote them down. It's all saved and it's been translated for you. It's quite a much more complicated story. In the case of Buddhism, the oldest texts are written in the language of Pali, and I believe they're from Sri Lanka, 300 years after the death of the Buddha. So it's in a language he didn't speak in a land that he never knew, 300 years after his death. These are complicated issues to go into for a longer discussion, but it's a very different story with the Quran. It was something that was recited and memorized and basically revised in the lifetime of the Prophet, the conduit of that message, memorized by his companions, written down in its entirety by people who had memorized it in its entirety, who could obviously therefore verify it, meaning you've memorized it, you're known to have memorized it correctly, and so has this person, or so have I. So let's make sure that we're in agreement on all this. And there it is. Now, you can take it or leave it, but I think you can only do that after knowing it. Here's one proof. And it's very profound when you think about it. So I'm going to offer it, and then I'm going to offer my explanation, my humble explanation. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإن كنتم في ريب مما نزلنا على عبدنا فأتوا بسورة من مثله وادعوا شهداءكم من دون الله إن كنتم صادقين وإن لم تفعلوا ولن تفعلوا فاتقوا النار التي وقودها الناس والحجارة أعدت للكافرين. That portion of a verse basically said, and if you are in doubt about that which we have sent to our servant. Now the we is the plural we, the royal we. So Allah is speaking about himself, but it's a way that a person one of respect would address oneself, present oneself. So if you are in doubt about that which we have sent to our slave, our servant, meaning the one who we consider to be doing what we wish to be done, servant or slave in that sense. If you're in doubt about that which we have sent to him, then bring one chapter of its like, of its quality, of its profundity, right? And bring any witness you have who says it's like it, any helpers that you wish to help you create it. In kuntum sadiqin, if you are truthful. It's a challenge that if you don't believe that this is divine, then bring one chapter like it. There's 114 chapters here. Make it. If it's man-made, then you make it. Something like it, one chapter. You don't need to bring an entire book. Just bring one chapter. And bring everyone who says it's the same as this, and bring everyone who you want to help you create it. وَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا. And this goes into the grammar, but basically it means, and if you've never done it, it's an absolute. It's not just that you didn't do it, you have never done it. وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا. And you will never do it. Now this is what struck me when I very first began to read the Quran, because no one will do something and say, nothing like this has ever been done, and nothing like this ever will be done. If someone has an invention, the invention of Facebook, the dunking from the free throw line, it's not as though Dr. J said, you know what, no one ever did anything even close to this before, and no one ever will do this. It happened many times, right? You can go on YouTube and find people you never heard of dunking from the free throw line. You can find inventions similar to those. Most inventions are basically just a sort of a step forward or a step in a different direction in technology that's already there. So nothing that someone does, they may say they're the best, but what will they say? They're the best of their era. Pele, for example, considers himself to be the greatest soccer player ever. And he's arguably so, but he doesn't say, oh, no one else is like me, and no one else will ever be like me. No one has done anything like what I have done. You look at what I do, you watch anyone else play, and there's no similarity whatsoever. He doesn't say that. So this is a claim that only Allah, God, would make. You see what I'm saying? You would have to be Allah to even make such a claim. No human makes that type of claim. People say they're the best, but they never say there's never been anything like what I have done. and there will never be anything like what I have done, not even one portion of it. If you think about it, no one's actually said that before. No human has ever said that. No conqueror has ever said, no one has conquered as much as I have, and no one will ever conquer as much as me. Rather, they're comparing themselves to the great ones of old. Or they are trying to build a legacy that they hope no one will compete with. So the claim alone was divine. And what it is a challenge to do, which I now challenge anyone who's skeptical. And I encourage you to be skeptical. I remain skeptical within my faith. I don't one day I was searching, and once I found something, I'm no longer looking, and it's like, hey, let me just blind myself now. I remain skeptical. I'm still searching. So I'm searching within what I have found, in the same way that if you think that this is the right country for you to live in, you go and find everything there is to find within that country, and you go deeper into the history and the culture. If you feel that you have found the right person, you don't just say, okay, you're the right person, that's it. No. You continue to grow and search within that relationship. You don't say that this is the right building for me to be in and just stand right there in the doorway. No, you go in, right? So I encourage and challenge anyone and everyone to, I won't say with an open mind, I would just say read the Quran and seek out those who have found answers, or at least places to look. Maybe they can be the one to uncover a stone and say, I'm not going to tell you what to think, but have a look at this. Seek out people who are knowledgeable about life and the world and spirituality, in addition to being knowledgeable about the Quran, because they don't always go hand in hand, as well as studying it yourself. And that truly is the essence of Ramadan. Bye again.